Welcome back to our course, Overcome Impostor Syndrome. Now that you've learned some fundamental truths to embrace around impostor syndrome, it's time to learn how to overcome those feelings of fraud when they show up in real time. Again, please make sure you've downloaded the follow-along guide that comes with this course. So how do we overcome impostor syndrome? It's a long-term endeavor, but with practice, we can learn to cope with it by quieting that imposter voice and replacing it with a more encouraging one. In this module, you'll learn a 3-step process for coping with imposter syndrome. The goal is to reframe the distorted beliefs that are the hallmark of imposter syndrome immediately when they show up. Of course, this is not meant to address debilitating cases. If you're suffering from anxiety or depression, please seek professional counseling. Step 1 in this 3-step process is to name your fraud talk. Awareness is always the first step to change. Become aware of the automatic thoughts you have around being a fraud. Your inner critic telling you that you're not good enough, smart enough, that you don't measure up, that you don't belong. Let's look at some examples based on the imposter syndrome subtypes we identified in Module 2. What might the perfectionist think? I can't make a mistake. If I do that, it means I'm a failure. What about the superwoman? I have to do more. Working harder and taking on more is the only way to prove my worth. What about the natural genius? It should be easy. If it's hard for me, then I'm not that smart. What about the expert? I have to know it all. I better learn more and not ask questions or they'll find out I don't know what I'm doing. And finally, the soloist. I must do it alone. If I need help, it proves I'm incompetent. Regardless of your own distorted thinking, when that negative self-talk shows up, step 1 to overcome imposter syndrome is to name it. That's my imposter voice, or there's my fraud talk. Now that you've named it, step 2 is to challenge your fraud talk. Get real about the imposter thoughts that are limiting you. How true are they? Contrast your fraud thoughts with the evidence. This will be a great time to revisit your list of achievements and file of positive feedback that you created in Module 3. Ask yourself, if you called your biggest champion and shared your fraud thought, what would he or she tell you to convince you it's not true? Then craft a new, more positive message. Let's go over some examples. Let's say you're a perfectionist and you're telling yourself, I can't make a mistake. Here's what identifying and recrafting this thought would sound like. That's my fraud talk. I am human and perfectly imperfect. Making mistakes is part of learning and growing. Or let's say your subtype is superwoman and you're telling yourself, I have to do more. Here's a possible response. There's my imposter voice again. I am enough already, and doing less won't change that. What if you're the natural genius subtype and you're telling yourself it should be easy? You could counter that distorted thinking with, that's my fraud talk. I can be smart and be challenged. Both can be true. Let's say you fall into the expert subtype and you believe, I have to know it all. You could reframe this as, there's my imposter voice again. No one knows everything, and it's fun to learn. Or finally, let's say you're a soloist and you think, I must do it alone. You could tell yourself instead, that's my fraud talk. It's actually a sign of courage and strength to ask for help. Now that you've caught yourself in fraud talk and you've replaced that talk with a more positive message, step 3 is to put your new message into action. Prove to yourself that you are bigger than the fraud talk by taking small risks and acting in the face of your fears. It will be a gradual process, but with each step, you will be taking your power back and showing yourself who you really are. Here are some ways to do this. When someone gives you a compliment on a job well done, don't deflect it by pointing out your mistakes or giving the credit to others. Let yourself accept the praise and simply say, thank you. Challenge yourself to get out of your comfort zone. If you're a natural genius, say yes to a project or opportunity despite feeling like it will be hard for you and might stretch you beyond your natural abilities. Show yourself and others that you are not going to let your fraud talk keep you small anymore. Or if you're a superwoman, allow yourself to say no to yet another project or request so you can carve out some downtime for yourself. And remember to celebrate every small step you take out of your comfort zone, regardless of the outcome. Here's a new habit for soloists to try out. Ask for help. Start with something small, then gradually increase the ask. When you acknowledge your limitations and ask for help, you are valuing learning over performance. This is critical to moving you beyond your comfort zone and into a growth mindset. Next time you make a mistake, challenge your thinking about it. For the perfectionists among us, how can you look at this mistake in a positive and constructive way? What did it help you learn? How did it help you grow? How would you respond to your best friend if she made that same mistake? How can you extend that same generosity to yourself? Remember that if you're not failing, you're not taking risks. And if you're not taking risks, you're not growing. And if you fall into the expert subtype, practice displaying the limits of your knowledge. You can do this in small ways by saying, I don't know, and asking questions. Remember that nobody knows everything. Try it with one person first, then work up to doing this in a group setting. And for all of us, it's time that we become vocal about imposter syndrome. Most of us keep our feelings of fraud secret. We don't want to give anyone ideas. We think, if I tell my friend I feel like a fraud, she'll believe I am a fraud. We're afraid of being found out, so we don't talk about it. And the imposter feelings don't go away. Outing the imposter syndrome actually lessens its power over us. So talk about imposter syndrome with those close to you, maybe a trusted mentor, friend, therapist, or coach. I bet you'll find out that many people share your feelings of inadequacy. It's very comforting to know we are not alone. My bet is you'll also find out that others view you very differently than the harsh way you see yourself. So stop suffering in silence. Finally, by shining a light on imposter syndrome and taming your own feelings of fraud, you have the chance to become a role model. Consider how you might mentor others who you see are also struggling with imposter syndrome. Talk to them about your feelings of fraud and how you're working to counter that negative self-talk with more positive thoughts. Bonus, when you become a mentor, you get to reveal the skills that you may have taken for granted. So go ahead and pay it forward. Help others on their journeys to own their worth and play big. Let's recap the ways you can quiet the imposter every time it shows up. First, name it when it shows up. That's my fraud talk. Second, challenge your fraud talk with an empowering reminder of your worth. And third, take action to counter your fraud talk. Here are your Module 4 assignments. First, get clear on what you tell yourself when you feel like a fraud. What is your distorted and limiting belief? Second, choose more empowering self-talk to respond to your imposter syndrome. And third, put the 3-step process into action by naming your imposter syndrome when it shows up, talking back to yourself, and taking action in spite of your feelings of fraud. Quieting your imposter thoughts will take time and effort. Think about it. You've been telling yourself the same old story for years, but the effort is well worth it. By freeing yourself from your limiting fraud talk, you'll be able to embrace your value and step into your power. Be sure to check the helpful resources on the last page of the follow-along guide that comes with this course. Here's to quieting the imposter. Until then, be well.